What is the thing? What is the black circle above
Ah,
your left? Yes. What is that?
it is a black circle. That is just a hat. It was my grandpa's hat, and I hung it up there.
Okay.
But it just looks like a black circle, and
Yeah. I'm into it though.
right
Is it
on
a
the black
perfect
circle.
circle?
Welcome to General Admission. Today is July 13th, and we are very excited to bring you an interview this episode with one of our favorite podcasters, a name you've probably heard us mention many times, many episodes, Rob Harvilla of 60 Songs That Explain the 90s. Um, Easily like my favorite music podcast, one of my favorite podcasts by far. I know Brett feels the same way.
Phenomenal podcast, especially if you're a fan of 90s music, which I feel like most of people who listen to our podcast would be, I would assume. But it's like I even said this to him. I was like, I recommend his podcast over ours to people more, which doesn't really make sense, but like that's how good it is.
Yeah. I'm always telling people to check out his podcast. Yeah, he picks a song and does an episode on it, but it's not that simple like at all. He deep dives like the artist and where he was as a kid and when he first heard the song, and like really like puts you in those shoes as when you were first hearing certain music for the first time. And for those of us who were too young in the 90s to have heard, I don't know, like Smells Like Teen Spirit in 94 or whatever, like we can hear from someone who did and what he thought when he heard that. And it's great. It's funny. Rob's awesome. He works really hard on the show. So it was super cool to get him on and kind of pick his brain a little bit. Yeah, we talked about a lot of stuff from just podcasting to different bands, live shows, a little Phish talk. Sorry, not sorry.
His book talk too.
Yes, he's got a book coming out. That's I think just also called 60 Songs That Explain the 90s. Um, Spoiler alert, he's done way more than 60 songs.
I believe the book contains more than 60 songs
Yeah.
too, but
Um, some of my favorite episodes, if you're just gonna go check it out. I love the Say It Ain't So Weezer episode, Closer, 9 Inch Nails, Wood, Alice in Chains, doot doot. You'll hear that shortly. Um,
Tool was a
what
good
else?
one.
Tool, Stinkfist was great. There's so many. There's so many. I don't want to forget ones. But yeah, those are definitely like big ones that come to mind because those are songs and artists that like I love. But like he did Regulate last week by like Warren G and Nate Dogg, and that was awesome. Like hearing that story. Um
You had Nookie.
Nookie. I haven't listened to the Nookie episode. I don't know
That's a good
why.
one.
Yeah. I'm glad that there's still episodes I haven't listened to because I'm gonna be sad when I run out. So
But we still have a couple more months of that. So
yes. Yeah. Yeah, you can find him on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. 60 Songs That Explain the 90s. Yeah, Rob was super cool. We are very thankful for his time and for coming on the show. Be sure to check out his podcast and his book. And yeah, Rob Harvilla. Let's talk to him. Ladies and gentlemen, we have podcasting royalty in the house tonight. We now welcome on a very, very special guest. He is Rob Harvilla. Whoa, I really went hard on
That's
that doot doot.
that's
Um,
very sweet of you. That's the best intro I've ever received in
oh,
my
thank
life.
you.
I'm honored. It's hard to
Yeah,
do, right? Like you don't know what pitch it's gonna come out as. It's like toot, toot. See, like it's yeah. It's
yeah,
I
you
haven't
really
tried it
want to
in a while.
project it, but you don't want to scream it. So I thought if I leaned back, that might kind of
It's hard.
not
Yeah,
kill the
there is a
listener's ears.
physical, a little bit of a follow through is yeah. It's so
All
you got
right,
to practice it.
I'll
That was
work on
good.
it.
That was good
Thank
for
you.
your first time on mic. I assume maybe it's not. Maybe you do this all the time, but
We
that
haven't
was
mic'd
new.
the doot doot yet.
Okay.
that
But
was a
yes,
first.
Rob is host of 60 Songs That Explain the 90s. I think he's 98 episodes in at this point, with probably more on the way. he has a book coming out that we're very excited about. Congrats on all the great things. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. I'm honored. Thanks for the offer.
Yeah. So we're just gonna grill you this whole podcast and tell
Please.
you songs we think you should do episodes on. Sound good?
You will be the first two people to ever suggest songs to me. And so that's very exciting. This will be a new experience. I love it. I'm so mad. I've said this before, but I wish I had opened a spreadsheet the day the podcast launched and just kept track of what people suggested. Like I can't sort of rebuild that via DMs or whatever, or like tweets. But I want like a chart. I want the data. Like I have an anecdotal sense of what I think has been like the most requested songs, but I don't know for sure, and I want to know for sure. So
Yeah.
it's a bummer.
Have any convinced you?
Sure. I'm trying to think. A few times the guests have. I really want to talk to a guest. The one I always think of, she does, you must remember this, Karina Longworth. Like I really wanted to have her on, and she really wanted to do Jane's Addiction, who was like on the long list, right? But like I wasn't huge into them in high school. They didn't seem essential to me necessarily, but she really wanted to do them. And I'm really glad I did. I'm always glad when I am convinced. There's a big run of Blind Melon right now. I'm trying to figure out if it's coordinated. If like this is an AstroTurf thing, but I'm getting a lot of DMs. Like No Rain is really interesting. Like, and it's convincing.
It's a crazy story too. That lead singer has been through like so much.
Yeah,
I thought you did do an episode
story
on it, but I guess I listened to another podcast about Blind Melon.
I haven't done it yet, and I don't think he's come up like even sort of tangentially, which often people do, of course. But yeah, I haven't gotten to that at all. And you got to think that at some point, the B girl of it all has got to come up somewhere somehow. So I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. You held off on Nirvana for quite a while, so I'm sure that was always like, where's Nirvana?
I was, for a long time, that was going to be the end, right? That was going to be the end, the second to the end. But then that itself started to feel like too obvious or anticlimactic to me. And then there was like the Courtney Love of it all, right? Like I started talking to her and she seemed interested, and like, if she's interested right now, I better do this right now. And it just felt right to try and deploy it in a way that would be surprising. Like I felt people might be expecting it to be the last one, and try to push against that.
She became the host that episode, right?
She absolutely did, which is what I wanted, right? Like if you've ever heard her interviewed in any context, right? Like she was on Marin, she was on WTF a couple months before my thing, and it's like I went into that absolutely knowing it was going to be a 90-10 split of who was talking. But people have heard my voice enough, absolutely, at this point. So absolutely, that's what I wanted. But she absolutely became the host, and I was glad of it. Absolutely.
That was a wild ride.
I did. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. I remember just sort of pacing around the house for the hour or two before we talked, before we were scheduled to talk. Like it wasn't like I was trying to psych myself up or anything. Like I was just in this weird, like sort of internally vibrating headspace where I was just nervous, basically, right? And then I have to sort of depressurize after talking to her for an hour and 50 minutes straight. But yeah, it's got to be the most surreal thing that's ever happened to me, professionally or personally, probably.
Did you get a heads up on those alternate lyrics, or did she just pull those out on the spot 3/4 through?
We talked about it a little bit. Yeah, I had a little bit of an advance warning on that. Like you can find some of them are printed like in biographies of Nirvana or Kurt Cobain, or as the notebooks, just journals that they put out. But some of them I had never seen before. But she talked a lot about that. But even there's a difference between knowing that that's going to come up and then being on a Zoom call like this, and Courtney Love is like sitting there with like a plant next to her, and she's holding this piece of paper and she's reading in her, like she's singing, right? Like she's singing in the Courtney Love singing voice, with which I am familiar, like the words to a song that's like so ingrained in my soul and in everybody's soul. Like there's just nothing to prepare you for the wildness of that melody delivered by that voice on a Zoom call, like on a Wednesday.
From London.
From London, exactly, from London. Yeah, it was very hard to process just as a logistical event.
Yeah, just thinking about it. Still like
Yes.
It's like a 3-hour podcast. I think it's by far the longest episode, right?
It was by far the longest episode, and with any luck, it will be the longest episode. But everyone was like, "Oh, it's 3 hours? Like, really?" It's like, this is the one. Like, I can't imagine a scenario in which I will ever talk to a guest for 2 hours. First of all, and then like I tried not to build up Smells Like Teen Spirit too much in my head, but again, I always sort of perceived it as the final boss of this thing, right? Like if I think of one song from the 90s, if we're ranking by importance, which generally I'm not, they're not in any order, they're not in ascending or descending order of importance, but like that was a big one. And I always knew it was a big one. And I was trying not to psych myself out about it, but like that was always going to be a big one and a long one even before Courtney got involved. But I'm almost positive that will be the last near 3-hour episode. I think my editors and handlers would be thrilled if I never do that again. My editor too, Jonathan Kerma, who edited that episode, did like an incredible job, and just an incredible amount of work to do that, and I was really grateful for that.
That one for sure like lived up to the hype though of that song. Like you couldn't have a better guest than that. And to get all the stories and just the whole experience of it.
Yeah, no, it was wild. I had also thought one of the reasons I was putting it off is like, who do I get for Smells Like Teen Spirit? Like I've been thrilled with the guests that I've had, and I've been so grateful to all of them for their time and their expertise, and people that I so admire. But like, Courtney Love is just like a different sort of stratosphere of person to talk to for a show like this. And so absolutely, I literally couldn't have thought of somebody I'd rather talk to about it than her.
Yeah, you mentioned Jonathan, your editor. He's awesome. I feel like I've heard him on other Ringer
He's
podcasts.
on everything.
Yeah.
Did you ever listen to No Skips? It was Shea Serrano and Brandon, and they did like rap albums, right? Every show is about one rap album. I only bring that up because like Shea would be like, Karm, like give me sound effects, give me machine guns and stuff. Like Karm like sort of became a character in that classic like talk radio, producer sort of role. Like he does everything. You've definitely heard him talked about before.
Yeah. Do you record and then just like fire it off to him, or is there some collaboration when it comes to editing?
He's on the Zoom, and I think he has the script that I'm reading, and I think he marks where I screw up, right? Where I stumble over a word and I restart, and he just sort of has the map of where he has to sort of cut, and there's not really any pickups, any splicing things together. It's just a matter of, where I mess up and taking out those things. But he's on the Zoom call with me. Justin Sales, who has been my editor, my producer from the beginning, is usually on the call as well, and then Karm is the interviews, of course, he's also editing them, just for pauses and sort of minor things. Usually it's only 20 minutes or so, but so he's there for everything. I've done very little, if any, like solo recording, where I send him a file. Like he's there when I'm talking, even if he's reading a magazine or whatever. That's fine.
Yeah, it's like a dream of mine because we record like Mondays or Tuesdays, and then I try to get it out for Thursday. It's just like sometimes it's time consuming. I try to remember where
I'm sure it is
paused or disconnected or whatever happened.
Oh God, do you have like a notebook next to you, or like how do you do that?
So we don't do doots, but we do whoops, and then when I see the audio spike, I know that's where I gotta check something out.
That's interesting. Oh, that's so clever. That's very clever. So it's
all based on the levels.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. What are your day jobs?
I work for a music supply company, like selling gear and stuff like that.
Cool.
So I get to be in the world at least.
Yeah.
And I work as an SEO manager.
All right.
Yeah,
Awesome. So
apply it to us, Brett. Come on.
I know.
Come on. We
I
just
get
got
so burned out during the day. It's like I don't want to
I
keep doing
know.
this at night.
Well, we just
that
got
you're
on
off the
Threads,
clock.
so
Yeah.
Instagram Threads is gonna take us to the moon, right?
I've been avoiding that so far. I can't think of a bio. It's like that simple. It's like I don't want to write a new bio for
It's
myself. It's just
the
I
first
did it
step.
for yeah, I did it for Mastodon. I think Mastodon, which I have not checked. I assume nobody has checked Mastodon in like months.
That was like the tech one, right?
Yeah, that was yes. It's very confusing. I don't understand. I didn't understand it at all, but I thought of a bio for that. I'm gonna wait and see what happens with Threads. I'm gonna go ahead and be a late adopter if it turns out to be like a thing worth doing.
Yeah, we'll find out. On the topic of editing, do you ever get pushback for like the 10-second song clips in there? Because we're gonna base all our knowledge off what you tell us right now, because we haven't used songs on our podcast, and I want to.
No, it's weird, and I should know more concretely than I do. But
no one knows. It's okay.
There we go. I think that's
a loose rule.
I think that's actually the rule. The thing that's always been in my head is about 10 seconds, ideally 8. If like the song is slow and like I'm really like, can we please, like I can get to like 12 seconds, right? But like that's it's always been in my head from the beginning. When the show launched in 2020, we were a part of a Spotify program called Music and Talk. And that's why the song used to be at the end of the episode. You guys know Bandsplain?
Yeah.
You know how Bandsplain is, the song's interspersed. Like that was always, I thought, the best use of it. And so I always wondered if for that reason, because we were some sort of new project and we were supposed to integrate with music specifically, if that gave us a little more leeway in terms of using clips, because it's clip heavy, it's like 50, 60 clips. But I think it does just come down to fair use. The pushback I get, like what I can't do is like drop in a clip from a song and not acknowledge it, like as a joke. Like I have to provide commentary. I have to provide context. Like just for legal cover, I have to say something about what I just played to justify playing it. You know what I mean? And so like there has to be some sort of editorial thing. Like, and again, there's sort of an internal censor of how many clips from a song I can play. Like I just did Regulate and I found myself using just literally every line from Regulate. And like there was this siren going off in my head, like I'm gonna get in trouble for using, like 80% of this song. But it's an inexact science. And I think you're right that nobody knows, but the answer is that a lawyer at least looks it over and works with Karm. And like sometimes that's a pain in the ass. And sometimes they do ask if we can like shave off a second here, a few seconds here, we're using too many clips, or there's not enough editorial, justification for the clip. But I think that's like preemptive, right? Like to my knowledge, we've never gotten any pushback, but that's not them knowing where the line is. That's just their internal sense of how much we can get away with, if anybody, any artist, whoever ever complains, like I used Prince. I was worried to do Prince, right? Because the Prince, historically has just been so averse to technology and having his music used for things. And like, I don't know, if the Prince estate is like super vigilant about this, and it worked out fine, or at least it has so far. But yeah, I'm really curious about it, and I have these sort of internal guidelines, that were conveyed to me by my lawyers, but I don't think their guidelines are based on anything other, than fair use and like their best guess as to what we can do.
All right, so we're gonna start using clips, and we're gonna say Rob Harvilla told us.
That was a long answer.
We'll tell the lawyer.
Can absolutely blame. Yes. The Harvilla doctrine is in effect. You can blame it all on me. Absolutely, I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you, appreciate it. So I just finished Regulate, and then I just bounce around a lot throughout these episodes, and I'm developing now memories for episodes like I have memories for songs, and I feel like this is like Inception on another level now of me.
All right, that is very complicated.
That's so we might have to start 60 episodes of 60 songs that explain the 90s, that explain 60
the 2020s.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll work on that. I'm great with
title.
titles. Yeah, I'm really everybody loves that this title is now inaccurate. So I'm definitely the guy to talk to about titles of things.
I'm sure you never hear about that.
No, it's I don't get too much shit about it. You know, the book is weird. I think the book's title has now changed to 60 songs that explain the 90s, even though there are more than 60 songs in it, just because that continuity, you know, like I even setting aside wanting to connect it to the podcast, I think putting a number on it is just pops a little more than just songs that explain the 90s. Right, you know, my other thought was like, do we just pick the exact, it's like 110 songs, you know, like it's a boondoggle. But it is very funny to me, you know, to say this is the 99th episode of 60 songs that explain the 90s. Like that's just endlessly amusing to me.
And then speaking of the book, like, is it going to be like most of the episodes like translated, or will there be like additional content added to the songs that you touched on?
There's a lot added to it. You know, I sort of start with the scripts themselves, you know, which total 500,000 plus words, right? And so it starts with a foundation of like not like a greatest hits, but I'm just pulling out sections, you know, themes from the episodes themselves. And so I'm almost positive that every song that's appeared in an episode as of pre-Nirvana, so the first 90, all of those are in there. And then 25 to 30 other ones, you know, some of which I've covered on the show since, some of which I haven't, you know, and there's a lot of new content added to it. There's content is such a dorky word, but and they're sort of grouped chapter wise, like sellouts, for example, like there's like 10 or 12 songs discussed per chapter, and like the sellout chapter, like you think of course of Green Day, you know, or like Blink 182 not really caring about it, or like Metallica, you know, getting so huge with the Black Album. But you also think of like Coolio, like crossing over from rap to pop and like having this white suburban audience that made him so uncomfortable, and like the Weird Al of it all, etc. Like just trying to find interesting ways to put these songs and these artists in these micro eras together, you know, in ways that are hopefully unexpected, you know, and just sort of make sense to me, and I can make it make sense to the reader.
I was just say, was it more stressful like putting together the book than like putting together a podcast episode, or kind of a different kind of stress?
It was a different kind of stress, you know, because I do think in the back of my head when I first thought I'll do a book, I was just like, I'll just take the Google Docs, you know, and just dump them in a Microsoft Word file and just, you know, and it's just the realization that it was 500,000 words, you know, and like trying to visualize like the physical size of the book, you know, and so it's one of those things where it's pre-existing material, like some of it, you know, the foundation of it, but sort of stitching it together in a way where it doesn't feel stitched together, where it feels like it flows and it feels like these songs are in conversation with each other, you know, and it's not choppy that way. It was a lot of work, but it was really exciting. It was really cool at the same time. You know, I've been a rock critic for 20 plus years, and all I've ever wanted to do is write a book, you know, and I got to the point where I realized, you know, it's like, it's never going to happen unless I actually write a book, you know, it never occurred to me that I actually had to do it for it to happen. And so I just, whenever it did seem a little daunting or exhausting, just the thought of having a book, being able to write a book, publish a book, like that was enough, you know, enough adrenaline to carry me through. So it was definitely a different approach, but I really dug it. I'm glad it's over, but I really dug it.
It's nice too. You have a lot of friends that have also written books, so I'm sure you're able to pick their minds, like Dan Ozzie would Sell Out, or like Steve Hyden, and like all these guys.
Hyden, of course, yeah.
We've pulled so many books just through your episodes that we've taken as recommendations. So
awesome. I've meant to do like a bibliography, you know, which I think the problem for me there is I don't want to accidentally leave anybody out. Like I'll have this very strong desire to be thorough and not forget anybody, but like I would really like to do that, you know, because like from the very beginning, like Clover Hope's book on female MCs, you know, like I talked to her for Missy Elliott. I think it was the third or fourth episode. Like from the very beginning, you know, other people's books, friends' books have been really important, been crucial, been, necessary to the show. And I would like to put something together that's sort of definitive in that way, because that's great to hear if you've gone to any of those books, just because I mentioned them. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, we've just been keeping a list. I did Everyone Loves Our Town, which was a great read. Even the very beginning, because they talked a lot about was it the U-Men? And I'm like, I don't know who these guys are. And like the whole first half of the book is basically like based on them. But then once it kept going, and then you start to see names you're more familiar with. But it's still fun to just listen through everything that comes up, make a playlist, all that.
I sort of loved it for that, though, where like there's an entire era that you don't know about, and then suddenly like Seattle like exists
kaboom
to the wider world, right? But just the prehistory and the realization that like the U-Men were the rock stars, and were gods then, that just nobody knew about outside of Seattle. Like, yeah, it sort of starts slow in that sense, in like the big name sense, but I sort of dug it that it starts out as a modest like a local scene, and then it becomes just a zoo. That was a great book. I really
loved that book. It was a good read. We're doing yes, we're doing Where Are Your Boys Tonight, which is the 2000s like emo boom. So that's like 98.
That's right. Have you read that?
Where I read it way faster than I was supposed to. We're gonna do it week to week, talking about it, and I was away last weekend and just couldn't put it down. So yeah, I read it. Yeah. Brett's going. I'm just gonna read it again because I enjoyed it that much. But the parallels are like exactly the same. Like you have all these bands at the beginning that can like borderline take credit for everything and get no credit, and then they become like semi bitter, like, man, why is like Taking Back Sunday like super rich and no one knows who we are? And I'm like, this is very similar to that other book I just read.
Where does it end?
It ends in, I guess, right? So right around like the Black Parade, I guess.
Okay. Well, that's a good place to end, I guess. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. It was because that's what we came up on. So that's like, if we were gonna do 60 songs that explain the 2000s, that would
2000s.
Yeah. The 90s, as much as I love all that music, I was a kid, so like I didn't get to live it exactly the same. Like
it's not the same.
Yeah.
When you were a teenager, it's just when you were a teenager. That's the entire ball game, I think. And so yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. When you were talking about that Prince VMAs performance, that was the day I was born.
Oh shit.
I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Something.
There we go. Two significant events.
Yes.
From that day in the fall of 1991. That's hilarious.
I was disappointed to see Phish did not play a show the day I was born. I was hoping they would have, but no Phish show.
Were they around?
They were, but
that's early, right?
They weren't touring. Yeah, because I guess 89 is when they started like kind of doing stuff.
Okay. Are you a Phish guy?
Yeah, a little bit.
Both are.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. That's cool.
We love them.
They're interesting 90s wise because
do a Phish episode.
Yeah, no. It'd be interesting. Like I had Hoist. I got it through did a Columbia House thing with Hoist, right? And like Down with Disease. Like I want to say maybe I heard another song of theirs on the radio, but that was about it, right? Like, but I had Hoist and Rift in high school, but I never became, I didn't see them live until like the mid 2000s when I was living in New York. Like I'm no kind of super fan, but like I have enormous respect just for, the machine, the organic feeling machine that's built around them. And that's great. But yeah, it's sort of hard to pinpoint a song, like out of any other band. Like it's not the records, the records are the records are cool, the records are great, the songs on the records are great, but like that's not the point. That's not what makes them great and makes them so essential. It's interesting, but I've definitely considered Phish. I should do it, absolutely.
I don't know what's like, I guess Bouncing Around the Room, didn't that kind of go on the radio for like a second?
Farmhouse, maybe.
I don't know.
What was the one on Billy Breathes? Free.
That's a great guitar riff.
Yeah. I really love that one, but yeah, like Sample in a Jar, that's a Hoist one.
Yeah, that's more like rock centric, like just like a straightforward, not 15-minute song. You want to scare people.
Do they have like canonical bootlegs like from the 90s? Like I just, I've downloaded a lot of their stuff. Like I remember when they do the thing where they cover an album, like
Yeah, the
when they did
Halloween.
Talking Heads. I downloaded that. Like, do they have like canonical bootlegs in the like live albums in the same way that like Pearl Jam did that gigantic run in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I believe so. They have this app that has like a ton of stuff. And then there's
Yeah.
websites that are like less official recordings but still sound cool.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, there's
Spotify
like
has them, and they have like the different volumes, like the live shows,
That's what I
like
was just
volume one,
looking
volume
up.
two, volume three.
Yeah. That Farmhouse is their most played song on Spotify. This is obviously like
yeah.
imperfect. It's Farmhouse and Sample in a Jar are the two. Like again, like that's cool, but like that doesn't tell you what's important about them at all. Like they're a really interesting case in that way. But yeah, holy crap. Yeah, there's a
I know.
It's a ton. Yeah.
Yeah.
it is a tie. I was not prepared for this, but that's dope, man. Like that's the way to do it. Chicago 94, like yeah, this I'll set aside some time and get in on this. If if there's like one Grateful Dead show, and I always forget what it is that like people say is like the ultimate like entry point. Like there's one that there's the one you listen to first. Like if you have a
Yeah.
suggestion of where to start with a Phish live album,
Uh
or like
Live one,
yeah.
hit me
right?
A live one.
from
It's just like
from
MSG.
95.
From
Yeah.
95.
Here,
Yeah.
here it is. Here it is.
Yeah.
No,
That's
that's
the
cool.
moneymaker. Then there's
All
like the whole
right.
Baker's Dozen run if you want to spend like a month listening to Phish.
And I very well may.
That's what
Absolutely. Okay.
how
Yeah.
I got Brett into them. Brett, like when we started this podcast, didn't listen to him too much. Then I would talk
Yeah.
about him like a sports team during like the summer. Like, here's what they did last night. It was crazy. And then here we are going
And
to
now I'm hooked
Philly
too.
in
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Oh, awesome. 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 Are you Ween guys?
Not too much. I don't really listen to much like jam music other than Phish. It's like Phish and
That's
emo music
interesting.
and grunge.
Phish and emo music and grunge. That's really all you need. Those are the three
Yeah,
Interesting
things.
cocktail. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's just don't drink them together necessarily, but fabulous.
How do you decide on songs sometimes? Because like we were just kind of doing it with Phish, where we're looking at Spotify plays. We love looking
Yeah.
at Spotify plays. It's very fun to just like
It
guess
is.
numbers.
Yeah, it's great when I'm wrong, like it's great when I'm like, what? Like, yeah, I'm trying to think of an example of that where what I thought would be their most played song is for sure not their most played song. It'll come to me. But yeah, I,
Yeah.
I love doing that. It's sometimes it's obvious, for Nirvana for a while, I was gonna do Where Did You Sleep Last Night? I was gonna zag and be all
Yeah,
like cool or whatever. But like in some
The
cases, it's
unplugged
like you
show.
got yeah,
yeah,
yes. And like, but sometimes you got to there's like an obvious answer, and like the answer is obvious for a reason. But there have been times where I have liked to do, kind of an unexpected song. Like when Bill Simmons came on, like he wanted to do Mayonnaise for the Smashing Pumpkins episode, right? Like that's probably not the one I would have picked, but I love that song. And like that's sort of another avenue of like being a little unexpected sometimes, like I'm trying to think of another example where the song was not necessarily the most obvious one. Janet Jackson, it took me a long time to decide, just because I love her so much, but like all the songs I really wanted to do were on Rhythm Nation, which was like 1989. Like I barely missed the cutoff,
man
and
of
so it took me
principle.
a while. Yes, yeah, exactly. I'd like to think that I am. And so it took me a while to decide on Together Again, but that turned out to be absolutely the right decision. But I do like, a slightly different song sometimes without being too obnoxious about it, hopefully.
Speaking of that Bill Simmons episode, do you think he has the hottest take out of all your guests on that episode? Because he pretty, like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, if Billy Corgan died after Melancholy, their legacy would be a lot better than what it is now. Like I like audibly gasped when he said that. I was like, oh my God.
That's
So
yeah.
aggressive.
Hypotheticals that involve people dying are pretty tough. That's why he's the man. Yeah, it's fascinating, just the Billy Corgan arc. right? And like you can't even really call it a heel turn, because I think he was sort of heel-esque very much by design the entire time. Like I did the band splain episode on Smashing Pumpkins, and like that was really gratifying, honestly, to like go back through that giant ass catalog and like
It's a two-parter, right?
Yes,
That
it was a
episode?
two-parter.
Yeah.
And like the Aeroplane Flies High, which was like the box set where each single off Melancholy, which is already a double album, like got its own album. It was like a 5-disc set. Like there are so many outtakes. And now it's on Spotify with its own set of bonus tracks, like remastered as of like 10 years ago. Like it's just so much. And so like, yeah, like the last 10, 15, 20 years of Smashing Pumpkins music is not essential in the way that Siamese Dream, Melancholy are, for me and for most people. But like I'm still glad it's there. Like I certainly get that take, in the abstract, and like people talk about like REM, for example, like the records that they put out after Bill Berry left. Like I love Up, actually, and like I love a lot of the next 3 or 4 records, but like those records aren't as good as the 80s records or like Automatic for the People. It's like you can look at somebody's discography and you can rank it in your head, and you can determine that like the last 5, 6, 7, 8 records don't make your top 5 or whatever. But I'm still glad that they exist the vast majority of the time, and I'm glad they're still out there doing it, even if I don't love it the way I loved the records they put out when I was a teenager.
Are we talking about Weezer now, or
Weezer, of course. That's the fine. Yes. Wow. Yes. That's so funny. That I was thinking about their cover of Africa the other day for some reason, and it's just, yeah, Weezer is a fantastic example of that. Probably the most dramatic example of like the first 2, maybe 3 records, like just being walled off from everything else.
it's like a separate band?
Trip. Yeah, it really does feel that way. It's wild.
Probably the Spotify factor too. Like I'm sure Africa is like one of their most top played songs, and like that doesn't really tell the story of that band either. Although it kind of does, I guess, if you like, if you have recency
is that
bias.
true?
But I think it's got to be in the top 5.
I'm gonna say Island in the Sun.
You're right. Island in the Sun is right. Island in the Sun is 600 million.
Damn.
All of these are okay. Island in the Sun 600, Say It Ain't So 400, Buddy Holly 317, Beverly Hills 212, Sweater Song. Africa's not on here.
It's off by decades though, so it's got a lot of catching up
it doesn't have the accumulation. Undone 133, Hash Pipe 122. And yeah, I don't. I'll try and look up if I can remember what album Africa, what color album, the Teal album.
Yes.
If I recall correctly.
That was it.
Yeah. It's a modest 76,000. It's
is that all?
Cool. They covered No Scrubs, Billie Jean, and Stand By Me back to back on this.
What a
record.
run!
Wow.
I wonder. I mean, okay. We'll definitely get Africa when we see them in September, right, Brett?
I'm sure.
I think.
Where are you seeing them? What?
The See Here Now festival in Asbury.
Okay,
in New Jersey.
So
they're opening for Foo Fighters. I feel like festival, you're I don't know if they'd want to stick to their own songs, but also like Africa's really huge.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if that was like a weird blip that they did, or if that's actually something that they've added to their permanent repertoire. I love going through like setlists.com or whatever.
That's so much fun.
Yeah.
So like Phish obviously is the king of that, or Wilco. Like it's really dope to go back, and it's like I saw Wilco on tour and they didn't play Misunderstood, and I was so mad. And I could go and I could look and see that they played Misunderstood like the first 4 shows before mine, and the next 4, like I was so pissed. So like Ween is another one like that, where like I love it when there's enough enthusiasm for a database to tell you exactly how many times they played the song and when's the last time and all that.
Will you check out set lists leading up to a show you're going to? Assuming
Absolutely
it's a band.
not.
Yeah, no.
I feel very strongly about this. My younger brother, younger by about 4 years, like he checks it out. Like he wants to know, it's like, I do not want to know. I love that moment. I love forgetting a song and being reminded of it. You know, like
Yeah.
there's nothing like that moment of surprise. And it doesn't happen all that often, but when it does, like, no, I never want to check the set list before. Do you?
Uh, it's a coin
I do.
flip. Brett loves to. If it's a band where I know like everything, then no chance I want to. But if it's a band where
Okay.
I'm a big fan of one album but might not know the other stuff as well, then I kind of
Yeah.
want to do my homework a little bit, even though that never works out. I'm not gonna like learn the songs in 2 months. So,
Right.
but I
I
love being surprised too as well. Because when we saw
yeah.
Tool a couple years ago, they did like they played a lot off like the early stuff, which we weren't expecting. And
Right.
I didn't listen to them leading up to the show. And the whole show I was like, oh yeah, I love this song. Like everyone brought it
Yeah,
to me,
yeah.
which was kind of fun, like the opposite of listening to a band, just go cold on them before the show.
Right. No, that's a great way to do it. So I saw Tool, it was probably a couple years ago now, but like yeah, I was the same way, or like I figured they were just going to play the new album and like one or two old ones, and like they played a lot of the new album obviously, but they played Opiate, you know, which was the first EP, right? I
Yeah.
think they played Sober a lot on that tour, but did not play it at that show, which was a little bit of a bummer. But yeah, I was that was a good spread of old and new. I am looking at the most recent Weezer set list from the Hard Rock Casino in Northern Indiana, in Gary, Indiana. I've been at that casino. It was awful. I lost a lot of money. Very short amount of time. I got no Africa here.
Uh,
20 songs, closed with hash pipe. And is thank you and good night a song, or is that just a statement? This is weird. They did
I think it's off one of the
Suzanne.
season EPs.
Oh,
the
I have not
seasons.
messed with the season EPs. I have to say, I'm a little. You gave your love to me softly and Suzanne, both. That's pretty. Both of them. That's pretty dope.
They've
Some
been
deep
dipping
cuts right
into
there.
they've been dipping into Pinkerton a little bit. I thought like I saw like Get You being played and
Ooh,
uh
we got El Scorcho, Pink Triangle.
Pink
Pink
Triangle.
Triangle.
That's it.
I don't.
Maybe
I
that's what I
think
was
that's
thinking of.
it. I think that's it.
Oh, maybe I just saw a random clip.
I'd
I
love to
got
hear
excited. I
Get
thought,
You.
yeah,
Yeah, man, Get You would be dope.
that would be
The
so cool.
greatest man that ever lived. That's a good one. That's pork and beans. All right, this would be a good time. This would be a show. I'd
Yeah,
be like, I'll go see this, and then I'd be like super psyched the entire time I was there. I'll be like,
yeah.
yes.
This is gonna be Beach Boys, Weezer, then Foo Fighters on the
Oh
main
my
Interesting
stage.
god.
set, or interesting lineup, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
Oh
gonna get there for
god.
Beach Boys and then just keep moving up. So we're close for Foo
Yikes.
Fighters.
This is like the Mike Love controlled Beach Boys, right? Like this is suboptimal. Okay,
Yeah, I
that'll
don't
be
know who's
Beach Boys,
there.
Weezer, and Foo Fighters. That's wild. That's a good time.
It's gonna be something. But like you don't
It's
not
gonna
see
be
the Beach Boys if you're
no, no,
there.
I get it. They're gonna fucking do Kokomo and you're gonna lose your minds.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's yeah.
I mean Beach Boys on the beach. That's
Oh, there you go. There you go.
yeah,
You
you
gotta
can't
do
beat
it.
it. Do you have any shows coming up? Are you going to any summer tours?
There's a festival. I'm here in Ohio, and there's a festival in Southeast Ohio, like a little more rural area where I went to college, and there's a Nelsonville music festival. Like people camp, you know, it's out in a foresty type area. I will not be camping, but I'm gonna go to one day of that to see. I want to say Always is probably just how that's pronounced.
We've
That
questioned that.
band went
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Oh, great album.
We like
There's a
them.
couple
Yeah.
other ones. I went and saw Boy Genius that came through to Columbus about a month ago, and that was awesome. That was really rad. I think if I have anything else coming up. The National are playing with Pavements, like the Nationals festival in Cincinnati, but it's on one of my son's birthdays, so I'm not gonna get away with that. But I think
Yeah.
that festival is the only show that I have coming up. But I'd like to get a few more. What about you guys? Prior to, are you just saving all your energy for Beach Boys?
You have a crazy July week coming up. What's it, next week, Nick?
Yeah. We got
3 in a week.
Less Than Jake's are doing Hello Rockview in full in Asbury, so we're gonna go to that. Then we got Bouncing Souls with Bayside
wow.
and Screaming
All
Females.
right. Screaming Females are so rad.
Yeah, we had their drummer
so
on.
great.
They because they're Jersey too, so
Yeah,
Try
yeah,
to keep
yeah,
it in the
yeah, yeah.
family.
That's cool. That's awesome.
And then cap it off with Phish for July. It's gonna be good.
Damn,
Good little run.
pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, it started slim pickings. We weren't sure. And then all of a sudden everything gets announced and you start just buying tickets and
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be good. Plus it's good stuff to talk about on
Yeah.
the show.
Yeah.
So like we it's responsible to go to concerts,
I think it
right?
is. This
Yeah.
is your job.
Yes.
You're filling the well. Yeah, this is you can write this all off on your taxes, of course. Like, yeah, it's necessary. It's necessary work you're doing, and I salute
Purely
you.
research. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
exactly, exactly.
So Rob, you've been writing, you said, for most of your career, if not all your career. And you used to write for Alt Press, if I'm not mistaken.
I
Did you
did. Yes,
Was that
yes.
like a remote thing or did you move out there?
They were in. They are in Cleveland,
Oh,
and so grew up in
thought
the
they were in
suburbs, just
California.
about a half. No, man, they were in Cleveland. As far as I know, anyway. But I interned for them for a summer. I want to say 1988, 1999. I did not distinguish myself. I was an intern at the same time as Annie Zaleski. If you know her, she's like a great writer and editor, and they loved her and they hired her, but I just sort of skulked around, in the mailroom for a little while. But then, yeah, I freelanced for them, just freelance record reviews pretty much exclusively, I think, for a few years after that. I was in college at the time, and so they'd send me like 5 records, and I'd write 100 words on them a piece. But I some pretty rad records, like Pedro the Lion's Control. I remember reviewing that for Alt Press, and that was super dope, of course. But yeah, so I wrote for them for a little while. It's a bummer, like I don't think that archive really exists.
Yeah.
Like I even as like print, like I think it would be piecemeal to even try and go back and get back issues now off eBay or whatever. Like it's sort of a lost archive. At least it's not available to me. But yeah, that was great. And it was great to have that magazine, in Cleveland.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
they never set their website up right. I feel like it was always so hard to find articles online for them.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like I worked for alt weeklies when I started that were like philosophically opposed to the internet, like as a concept, and like that was a drag, and I don't recall alt press being like that about the internet, not like actively leery of it, but they definitely weren't going to put up all their stuff, or even most of any of their stuff on the internet. I can remember a time when the internet, when what your website was like, just a wasteland, where you just sent one kid to like fuck around and do whatever you wanted, but you didn't care about it. Like it's
HTML.
just yes, yes, and yeah, yeah. It was not a priority when I was starting out.
I miss newsrooms though. It makes me sad it's not a thing because
Sure.
we were both on
Jesus,
our
yes.
college's newspaper, so we
Oh,
we
I
had so
love
much
that.
fun there. And it was
Of
like, I'm gonna go
course.
write for a rock magazine. And then by the time we graduated, it was like, no, that's not
Everything was
really,
dying.
it's not a thing
I
anymore.
Oh God, I'm sorry. Yeah, if you're doing that in the mid 2000s or whatever, if you were born the night of Get Off, then yeah, unfortunately that path was not available to you. Yeah, it was weird. Like I went to college 1996 to 2000, and like I took classes in which the internet was like a spectral aspect, but I feel like I don't know where I was on the timeline, but I was like at the tail end of like the internet not being everything, and it's like, yeah, I met my wife at my first newsroom, at the Alt Weekly in Columbus here, like I remember staff meetings, just sitting around with people going to Mexican restaurants for lunch, like all of that. Like I miss all of that, and all of that does seem to be gone. The New York Times doesn't have a sports section anymore.
That's
It's like
crazy.
Wow.
it's upsetting. I've made my peace with it, or I think I have, until something like that happens. But no, I've loved newsrooms and I miss them terribly.
You ever laugh at what you're doing now and think about how you're basically still just writing, but now you have to read the articles to people?
Yes, I laugh about it all the time. It's so weird. It's so weird, the evolution of this. It's like I never imagined it. I really honestly didn't, and it's I had done podcasts, but I like guested on other people's podcasts and I felt really awkward about it. And it's not something I had ever considered until I was doing it. But it's weird. It's weird the evolution of like, this is exactly like just writing something, but then reading it. But it does affect my writing. Like what I don't like about my writing is when it gets super florid and like the semicolons and like the adverbs start taking over, right? But like I can't read that. I can't read that out loud, when my music when my writing passes a certain threshold of complexity, of like wonkery, like I can't read it out loud anymore. It's like it's so that's helpful in a way. I think, to me anyway, to my ear, it's made me a better writer, that I am forced to read it out loud and I am forced to reckon with what I have written.
Oh, I said that.
Yeah. There's plenty of times, and Karm can attest to this. I'll be approaching a prayer. It's like, I don't want to say that. It's like, oh God. And he's like, did you just say I don't want to say that to something that you wrote? It's like, yes. Yes, I did. And then I say it anyway, usually. And then I
Yep.
imitate Eddie Vedder singing Yellow Ledbetter or whatever it is. Yeah, it's like I did it to myself, but I have to follow through.
We're grateful for it.
Well, thanks.
I feel like you've like kind of like perfected like the storytelling aspect of podcasting. Like Nick and I honestly probably recommend your podcast more than our own to people. Like that's how much like we enjoy your show, because like the way you speak, like you can't pay attention to anything else. You have to focus on every word you say, and it's easy to get like lost in it. So like, was that something that just like came with practice, or like was it just like a natural kind of thing once you started?
That's really kind of you. I really appreciate that. It's weird. Yeah, I was trying, when I started the book, I went back and I reread all the scripts, and so I go back to episode 1, You Ought to Know. My Alanis Morissette, like written probably in August of 2020, and like the first obvious thing is like that script is like 1,600 words. Whereas Regulate was 8,000, right? Like the first thing that happened is they got 5 to 10 times longer. But I didn't cringe as much as I thought I would looking at the old stuff, but I do think that the storytelling aspect, and like trying to find a natural way where, like, I think you can tell that they're scripted down to the word. Like I don't think it sounds like I'm just talking off the dome or whatever, but like to not have it sound stiff, is always very important to me, and like one thing I'm not going to do is re-listen, like absolutely not. Like, and so maybe I would go back and listen to the first episode and I would sound horrible to myself. But I do think it sort of it was just sort of a natural progression, that as they got longer and as they got more detailed and as they got a little more discursive, I didn't go into this thinking I'd talk about myself really at all, like my family, my day, teenage anecdotes. Like I didn't think that was the focal point when I started. And I don't know if it is now, but like slowly bringing in more of myself, more of myself now and more of myself then, like that's all stuff that sort of happened naturally. And hopefully there is, along with that, I found sort of a rhythm, where it's written, scripted down to the word, but it does sound natural, where I've again sort of pruned, the adverb heavy, like rock critic ease that I'm always worried that I'm lapsing into when I write. It was a matter of trying to figure out what's the same about this, versus what I've always done, and what's different about it. And there's a lot that's the same, but there's a lot that's different. And, I've just sort of found my way to a place, where hopefully it makes sense and hopefully it sounds prepared, but it doesn't sound, awkwardly stiff and lifeless.
I think it was the Sunny Day Real Estate episode. You mentioned something, how you kind of try not to look to what the bands have said about these things, but rather about where you are in your life for stuff. And
Yeah.
I think that's what led to like a lot of the success of the podcast. Cause like anyone could look up quotes from the band, but like to get that relation to it, like you sitting in your friend's Corolla or whatever, listening to Closer. It's like, man, I sat in my friend's car and listened to this album. Maybe not Closer for me, but But yeah, just like I love that. I
Too
think you
young.
you said it,
Yeah.
bizarrely vivid and insultingly mundane personal reveries.
That sounds like me. Two adverbs in like 6 words there, I'll have you know. Yes. No, that was the idea. And like I always feel pretentious when I say that. But yeah, that is the idea, that I tell an obviously an insultingly mundane story about the time my buddy James, we were driving to Denny's, and like, hurt by Nine Inch Nails. Oh, it was so great. But like that, just the idea is to get you thinking about when that happened to you, who you were with,
Yeah.
what song it was, where you were in your life, if that's a simple plan or whatever for you. I don't know what you kids are into, but yeah, that's the whole
Good guess.
idea. Thank you.
Pretty close.
Pretty
I
close,
did.
yeah.
I guess you are right. Like I want to know what the people themselves, what the artists themselves said, but I'm sort of coming along on this issue now. Like, would I ever want to have a guest where it's the artist? And I've always really resisted that. I've always felt that I'd rather talk to a huge fan of this song, and that's what I'd rather do than talk to the artist themselves. Because as you say, like, you can read the interviews, like they've talked a ton about themselves. Like, what you haven't heard someone talk about is someone who inspired them or a song from their teenage years. But yeah, that's again the personal aspect of it. And I was driving around with my friend one day in 1994 aspect of it. I did not expect that to be at all a major element of this, but it became that way. And like, I've gotten more feedback from this show easily than anything I've ever done. And I love that the feedback often is of that nature. Like, here's what I was listening to, and here's why you should do like the Tragically Hip, or Blind Melon or whatever, because this, and this happened to me. Like, I love hearing that stuff. And I love if this show is able to sort of activate, people's own memories, like you said. That's great.
Has Billy Corgan reached out to make the mayonnaise episode longer?
That is, first of all, I do feel bad that the first 10 to 15 are dramatically shorter. When I was talking to Courtney Love, she sent that episode to him, and he said something really funny. He's like, I'm not going to deal with this guy. He was dismissive in a beautifully, it really was an honor to me. And just, it's like, I'm not fucking dealing with this guy talking about his JV basketball team. And it was a perfect Billy Corgan brush off of me. It was an honor, truly. But I've had very few, if any, I can't really think, artists reach out to me about their own episodes. That would be fairly terrifying to me personally, actually. And so I'm grateful that nobody's said anything to me who I've talked about for 10,000 words.
You found a nice balance where like you said, you don't really have the artist on, but you've had other artists on to talk about. Like when you had Zach on from Pup. We're both big
that
Pup
was
fans.
so rad.
I was not
I love
expecting to
that
hear
fucking
him.
band so well.
They're so
that
great.
band is so rad.
They're awesome.
He was great. He was he Offspring? He was,
You're pretty fly for a white guy. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yes, that was great. I forgot about that. That was fantastic. The dude from Eve 6, he was great. He did the Third Eye Blind episode, I think. And like, it's so funny the way he's become, this oracle. He's an advice columnist now, like a really good one. The way he sort of found a second life as like a social media savvy media figure. Like, yeah, it's Sophie B. Hawkins. Like, that was so funny. Yeah, it's like, I don't know how that happens now that I think about it, but it was so rad to talk to her about anything, really.
How do you get in touch with these people? Like, or did they get in touch with you? Is it a mix?
It's me. Is it me? It's always me. Courtney Love was kind of her. Somebody passed her the whole episode, but everybody else, like, I'm still on all these email lists. I'm sort of plugged into sort of the Publicist network, right? And so I think Zach from Pup DM'd me. So he reached out to me, and that was super dope. I think I happened to see that Sophie B. Hawkins had a new album coming out, which is like the first one in 10 plus years. And I sort of put that together arbitrarily. Open Mike Eagle, who I've had on a bunch of times, who I really, really love, the rapper and the podcaster. I'm trying to think of how that happened the first time, but it was us. It was me reaching out to him for sure. So mostly it's me reaching out to people, you know, and it's I still get hundreds of emails, you know, a day, a week, you know, and I'm not really writing about new music at anywhere near the intensity that I used to be, but I still have ways of getting in touch with most people.
Yeah, that's kind of how we did it too, because we came from music websites, so we were on random publicist lists, and then it was like trying to be like, hey, instead of this noted website, how about they come on our podcast? that didn't go great.
Didn't go well
start.
first.
No.
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere. That's
and then
cool.
we
That's cool.
just blindly emailed whoever, and it works half the time. It's nice. You're here, so that's cool.
There you go. Works half the time is perfect. You never
half the
know
time
who you
it
can
works
get
every time.
Yeah.
It's a great batting average in baseball. So
yeah, exactly.
500, man. Totally.
Now, Rob, what do you think was coming like next for you? Like, do you think you'll keep doing 90s episodes, or do you think you might jump to something different eventually?
I got to figure that out, dude. I think we're done.
Retire on the book. Boom.
There was the plan originally. The show is going to end after the book. The book is out November 14th. The show is probably going to end in January. It'll get to 120. I think that's going to be it. You know, like we were trying to find the balance between, you know, we have a lot of songs we want to do. We have a decent amount of momentum. Like, let's keep doing this versus not wanting to overstay our welcome, you know, and get to a point where like, I could put together a list of 30 songs to get us to 150, but like I think it's probably time to find something else to do. And I got to figure out what that is. Like the first and maybe most obvious, and not necessarily, you know, it might be the best option, is like the aughts, like you said, you know, like for one thing, I don't like the aughts as like a term, but like the 2000s, you know, that first decade would be cool. You know, I can certainly think of, you know, 120 songs that I'd like to talk about. And so, yeah, I got to figure that out. I'm definitely going to do something. I'm definitely going to do another show. You know, the question is to what extent do we use the X songs that explain X framework, right? Like what's the right number? You know, we thought about the 80s, of course, but you know, the mantra that the music you listen to as a teenager, like the sweet spot for this show is people who were teenagers in the 90s. I'm very excited that you guys are younger, quite frankly, but to do the 80s, you know, it would require the target audience to be in their 50s, unfortunately. And so I don't know.
And
I got to figure out the answer to that. Yeah, exactly. We got to explain what a podcast is, and it's the whole thing.
It's just like
I got to figure out what I'm doing. It's just like the radio. I got to figure out what I'm doing, but I'm doing something.
Lots of airbase in the future. Airbase is superior. Absolutely. I had to tell you. I have to agree.
Airbase, absolutely. Has airbase come up? Really, Rage Against the Machine was the big one for airbase, but I should talk about airbase again because I agree with you that airbase is superior. You just look, you look either slightly less dorky or more dorky, or both simultaneously, and it's just airbase is superior. Absolutely. What is your favorite? What's your airbase band?
Ooh, I mean, Chili Peppers is a big one. Just
you got
it's like
that's an easy,
give it away. Yeah, totally.
You get the slide down, and you get to hit it with the thumb.
You certainly do. Yes, absolutely.
Green Day too.
Green Day, totally. Oh, Longview. Every time I hear Longview, it's like shit. That's so good. Yes, Green Day is a great one.
Welcome to Paradise solo too.
I love Welcome to Paradise is probably my favorite. That part of that song is probably my favorite individual Green Day moment. Absolutely. That's a great one. That's awesome. That's great.
So my last question for you. Can Nick and I guess one band, and then you can answer if it's going to be covered these last couple?
I don't think that ethically that's a good idea. I get people occasionally saying that they have, like, they're in competition, like they and their friends have this spreadsheet you know, in their
Fantasy
bedding.
60 songs.
They have like it basically is that. And for that reason, I always look at those lists and I'm always very curious about them. And it's not it's possible that I've picked songs because I've seen them on those lists. Actually, I can't think of an example, but like I'm always very interested, but I try and stay agnostic. You know, that's not the right term. I try and stay out of it. You know, like I'm trying to preserve the element of surprise. Who do you think, though?
I'm curious to see if you'll do Matchbox 20 or Sugar Ray.
Sugar Ray is so interesting. Somebody suggested Fly, and like the pivot of that song, like the band they were before, it's ridiculous. That would be a really good one. I saw Sugar Ray was played my college my senior year. That was like our big spring senior year show. See, Sugar Ray playing in the basketball arena with Orgy opening. I don't, Orgy means nothing to you guys. And they were a goth band. They were like an industrial goth band who covered Bizarre Love Triangle. And it was a big hit roundabouts 1999. Sugar Ray would be fascinating. Matchbox 22. I bought that record. I bought Yourself or Someone Like You, like from my college record store. And like I really liked it and was sort of baffled when they suddenly became like this VH1 core thing, you know, like that was such a weird arc. It was cool to talk about him so much in the Smooth episode, of course. Both of those would be great. Absolutely. But Fly is so weird.
Every Morning's weird too. Like if you ever like look at the lyrics of that one, like just makes no sense, but it was like a hit somehow.
Yeah, and that's them
the
trying to do the Backstreet, exactly. Yes, the melodic math of Every Morning. It doesn't have to make sense. It's and that's sort of post Fly, right? Like it's what's the like single? It's like Mean Machine or something, and it's like they were just such a different band, and it's just that they just turned overnight into this other like fabulous thing. But like I just it's hard to think of another song that was such a hard pivot that totally changed the band they were and how they were perceived and how they're remembered. You know, it's just a career making pivot song in that way. I don't know if I'm going to think about that, but Fly would be a great one. Absolutely.
What about you, Nick?
Well, when I think of this artist, I think more of the 2000s, but he did have an album come out in 97. So maybe like Eminem with Guilty Conscience or something. Like
Eminem's tough that way. Yeah.
His splash didn't really happen until the 2000s, but
My Nina's was 90s though, right?
My
yeah, you could do that.
Maybe it was a single in 98, it blew up in 99, but it's like
it's not a 90s artist.
That's the thing. That's the thing. It's that on paper, absolutely 1999, but he doesn't feel 90s at all. I'm trying to think of somebody else who was like that, because there are plenty of people like that. Somebody sent me like a graph of the years, like where each song falls in the year. And like obviously there's a huge concentration of like 94, 95, 96, right? And like the fewest are 90 and 99. Right. You know, like I was trying to think, what are the 99 ones I've done? Like Backstreet Boys was 1999, and that kind of Nookie, thank you. Nookie was a big, and that feels, I think Woodstock 99 like nails them down.
Oh yeah.
But you are absolutely right that Eminem is very specifically vexing in that sense. Like Britney Spears, like Baby One More Time was 99, and like kind of she feels 90s, but not really. It's weird. Once you get to the edges, you know, the 1990 stuff is obviously 80s, you know, in vibe, you know, like the decade didn't start until Nevermind or whatever. And the 1999 stuff, like Steal My Sunshine is 99, right? And I guess that's enough of like a one-hit wonder type vibe that feels a little more canonically 90s, but like it's so late, you know. It gets in right at the buzzer. It's weird. Like Eminem's weird.
And Steal My Sunshine uses like that 70s sample, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's sort of unstuck in time, definitionally. But yeah, that stuff is fascinating to me. You know, what feels 90s, even if it isn't, it doesn't feel 90s, even if it is. Yeah.
Well, Rob, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so
This
much
has
for
been
coming
great,
on.
man. I really, you guys have been really, it's taken a long time to set this up, and I am grateful for your patience with me. It's been awesome. It's been great.
Yeah,
You're
back
both
at
Things
you.
come to those that wait, right? That's the saying.
Yes.
How many episodes? You said 2 years you've been doing this. How many episodes have you done? I think you told me.
We're in like the 60s now.
Damn. All right.
Yeah. Once a week since
Year and a couple
March,
months.
last March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh shit. And you edit them yourselves. That's I've never done that, and I have an enormous respect for ever doing that once. I know myself and know that I would not be good at that. And so I am grateful to have that, and I have a great amount of respect to you for not having it and doing it yourself. That's so rad.
I don't want to do it myself.
I know you don't, but that's why I respect you so much.
Well, thank you. And thanks for
Thanks so
coming
much,
on. And
guys.
thanks for
Of course.
all the hours of listening to you talk about music.
It is many hours. It is a great many hours at this point. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Looking forward to the
Wow.
home stretch. And
Me too.
we'll pre-order the book. Where
Already did.
Amazon? Where do we pre-order
Thanks.
the book?
I asked my publishers that, and they did
Google.
not have. Yeah, like I think they said Amazon just because the algorithm.
They're like Amazon,
like
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, like I bought
Everything's
plenty
on
of
there.
things off bookshop.org. Like that's dope.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know what beyond that. I'm trying to think of where else I've ordered books, but like they said Amazon is fine. If you don't have any moral issues with Amazon, then Amazon is totally fine. Thank you for pre-ordering. I'm so excited. I'm so excited about it. But thank you.
I can't wait to read it.
Yes.
Hopefully it'll be good. I got the proofs. I got the PDF file of my final. The finality of the book is terrifying to me, right? Like it's at the end of this week, it's going to be gone, and the next time I'm going to see it, it's going to be in a physical, unalterable form. That is an uncomfortable feeling to me, but a great one as well. So I hope you like it.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Rob.
Talk to you soon.
See you guys.
High five.
That was great.